Hello, Carrie Rhodes here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and another stamping video. Today is episode 2 in my November Stamp Set of the Month series, featuring the Avery Elle stamp set Cocoa Stand. I love this set because not only can you make a cocoa stand, but you can make some other things. And today I am making a sledding stand that's a shaker card, and I'm bringing in a second stamp set to have some friends in this card. So I have the Polar Peekaboo Pals stamp set, also from Avery Elle, to dress up this card a little bit more. If you like this card, please give it a thumbs up, and I would love for you to leave a comment below. Everyone who leaves a comment is actually entered into a drawing to win the card in today's video. So now it's time to announce the winner of last week's card, which was the tree stand. So if you left a comment, your name got into a drawing, and I randomly drew out a name, and that person's name will appear across the screen right now. Yay! I will be in touch to get your address and get your card sent out to you right away. And now let's make a super cute shaker card. Okay, I have a mix of images here from the Cocoa Stand stamp set and the Polar Peekaboo Pal stamp set that I'm going to be stamping onto some Bristol Smooth cardstock with VersaFine Onyx black ink. I'm going to ink these up and stamp them down, and then I'll be coloring them all with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I have a little extra paper on the side there because I'm going to stamp more than one of some of the things. So once those are stamped out, I'll pull off the sled and stamp 3 more of those in the same ink, and then also one more hat. And that will be all the images that I'm going to color for this one card. It's a lot, but I wanted to show it to you. I'm using the Zig markers, and they're pretty fast to color with. I have sped this up greatly because I am coloring so many images, but I wanted you to see the coloring of the stand the most because I wanted it to have a white look, or kind of a white washed look. So I'm outlining these boards with a gray tint marker, and then I'm just drawing in some lines on each of those boards to give a little bit of a wood grain effect, similar to what I did with the colored pencils in last week's video. If you missed episode 1, I will make sure and link that for you below so you can check it out. I did all the coloring for that card in colored pencils. So this week, why not zigs, right? Okay, so now I'm bringing in a darker gray and coloring the side support elements and like the countertop with that darker gray, and then blending it out with the same gray tint marker that I used on the rest of this stand. And then the snow will get some highlights around the edge with the shadow mauve marker. It's a very light blue, and it works really good for these little snow pieces here on the stand. And then I'm softening out the edges with a blender. This is a marker that has no color to it, so it blends out those edges really well. Now I have a cool gray marker, light gray marker that I'm using for the polar bear just to give some shadow to the edges, and then I will go back and blend that out with that blending marker to soften those lines. I didn't want any harsh lines, and it works really well. And then for the nose, I'm going to be using the dark gray marker, which I will also use for the penguin. It's near black. And then a little tea rose on the cheeks, and then I will be using 2 different markers to complete his scarf, Geranium and Emerald. And each of those, I'm just going to outline the squares in the scarf, and then I'll blend those out with that blender pen, and that makes for a really nice Christmassy scarf. All right, so the same red marker is going to be used on all the rest of the red throughout this coloring. I did not want this hat to look like a Santa hat, so I made the top of the hat darker and the brim lighter, so it's an all red hat. And then for this scarf, I wanted it to be similar, all green. So what I did is I colored every other square all the way in, and then outlined the other remaining squares and blended those out. So it's like light green, dark green, light green, dark green. And I'm coloring the sleds with the red and the green, same red and green, Geranium for the red and Emerald for the green. And now I'm going to bring in some blue. So I'll have one blue sled, and this is Persian blue that I'm using here. And I'm going to color the second hat the same way as I did the red one, where the top is darker and the bottom is lighter for a two-toned hat that's one color. And that will be all the cute little accessories. So now let's color the fox. I'm going to be using light brown and beige to color him, and that gives him that little bit of reddish tint that I love so much on foxes. And these markers are so cool because you can blend them out with each other. Now, if you haven't used the zigs before, I want you to know that you really have to use Bristol smooth paper. They don't blend out on other kinds of paper, which I will actually show you later on in this video. It was a mistake, but it was like a good kind of lesson and way to show you that these do not blend out so on other papers. So Bristol Smooth is the way to go if you want your colors with your zigs or your Arteza markers to blend. You want Bristol Smooth paper. Watercolor paper also works if you want that texture on your paper. So there you go. There's my 2 cents. All right, so dark gray and light gray for the penguin, and then outlining the inside, the white part of the penguin with that same gray that I used on the polar bear. And then I used that also on the other white parts, so around the fox's face and the little pom-poms on the hats. Now for the deer, I'm using mid brown, and then I'll blend that out with the light brown. So he's a little bit darker than the fox, and I like his coloring even if it's not 100% authentic to how a deer is actually colored. I know, not colored, but how a deer actually looks, but I like how it turned out. All right, so using the blender just a little bit on this one, and I didn't like quite how light his muzzle was, so I went back in again with that light brown. And then the same thing for his body, and for the antlers, I wanted to make those darker than his body, so I'll be using a dark brown marker and blending that out with the mid brown. And that was a really good look for the antlers, I felt. And then I'll color in his nose, and I'll go back and color in their feet to match. And then I have a die to cut out every single piece on that page. You guys, even the hooves have their own die. Each hoof has a die. Each paw has a die. I love it. All right, so now I'm doing some ink blending with Salty Ocean Distress Oxide ink. I'm only using one color. A lot of my background is going to be covered and just some peeking through, so I didn't feel the need to do multiple colors and do a lot of blending. I'm going to spray that with some water from my distress sprayer, let that set for just a second, and then I'll come back in with a paper towel and blot up that excess water. And then I have some super cool oxidation on that paper that looks like snow in the background. All right, I'm using this particular border from the Border Basics die set by Fun Stamper's Journey, and I'm going to cut that on a 1-inch strip piece of paper to create a snowbank that matches the snowbank at the bottom of my sled stand. And then I'm going to take a plain piece of cardstock. This is about 2 3/4 of an inch, I believe, and I'm going to kind of figure out where that's going to go and just create a very subtle hill that will go behind my stand. So like 3 different layers for the front of this card. And then I'm just going to fussy cut that out. You could use like a really wide oval or a border die, but I just needed it to be like a certain way. I didn't want it to have stitching. The other border dies I have stitching, but I needed it to kind of match everything else. So I just cut it by hand. Then I'm coming back in with that same shadow mauve and adding a little accent to the top of these hills. Now this is not Bristol Smooth paper. So the ink actually went on like a different color, and I tried the blender and I was not able to blend it out. So it has more of a line and instead of a blended edge. All right, so now I'm stamping the word sledding from the Cocoa Stand stamp set in Candied Apple Red Distress Oxide ink. And then I'm pouring on some clear embossing powder and heat setting that so I have a raised up sentiment. Now I'm just taking a rectangle die and die cutting the center of this panel so that it will be the shaker window of my card. And then I'll glue to the back of it a window sheet. If you didn't know, this Tombow Mono liquid glue works great for adhering plastic to paper. So don't be afraid to use that when making a shaker card. And then I just like to go around my small bead of glue and kind of iron that out with my finger. So I'm going to go ahead and glue on my back hill. This is going to go flush with the bottom edge of my window panel. And then it is a little bit wider, so I can come in and trim off those edges, making sure that it's actually flush with each side. And then next I'll put on the smaller, more bumpy snowy hill and do the same thing. I'll get it on there how I like it, and then I'll trim off the excess. And then I've got to work kind of quickly to get my sledding stand nestled in there. You could be really careful about how much glue you put on the back of that little hill so that you can nestle your stand in there. I was totally going to do that and I forgot, so learn from me. And I'll just tuck that in, so most of that bottom line, the black line around the snow, is covered behind my front snowy hill. I'll put my little polar bear, not a panda, polar bear into the sledding stand. That's where he works, and he is so happy to do it. He loves it. So he gets his little paws resting on the stand there, which just really brings him to life. I love it. So the penguin is getting the red hat, and then he's getting tucked in the snowbank there. And my fox will get the blue hat, and he'll get tucked onto the left side. His hat fell off. And then my little deer with his red nose goes in the center. His antlers will cover up the paws of the polar bear a tiny bit. He gets a scarf, and then we'll put these sleds so they're sticking up out of the snowbank that comes from behind the sledding stand, and that just looks like they're ready to be rented, and these three friends are going to go have some fun doing some sledding. And the colors match their hats. Maybe they would get a sled that matched their hat. I don't know. Maybe they want a different color. And then I'll put their little hands or paws or fins or flippers on top of the snowbank, like they're peeking out from the snow. It's so deep. They're just going to have a ton of fun in the snow. So cute. The paws just are so precious. All right, so that's the front of the card, and now we just need to put the shaker together. So I am going to take some foam tape and cover the back of this card. If you have not made a shaker card before, then you'll want to watch this part closely. I am covering the back of the card. So the shaker elements that I'm putting in don't need to go down to the bottom of this card. They're only going to be seen at the top around the polar bear. So I am covering the bottom with foam tape. And then I needed to make my foam tape a little skinnier. So to make cutting easier, I'm sticking it to a piece of backing paper for my foam squares to cut it in half. And they're not pretty, but it worked really good. So then I didn't have such a sticky mess. This particular foam tape that I have is extremely sticky. So sticking it down to paper like this really helps. And then when I'm sticking this down, I want to make sure all the edges are touching. So my square is completely closed in. I've created a reservoir for my shaker elements. And then I'm going to rub the edge of those foam strips with my anti-static powder tool, so when I put in my Winter Kisses clay snowflake elements from Honeybee, they will not stick to the edge and they will float around smoothly when I shake my card. So then I just removed all the backing from my foam tape, and I'm going to take that splattered background and stick it to the back, enclosing all my shaker elements, and I'll really press that into place. And then I've got my shaker, and this is ready to go onto a card base. My card base is 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2, and my card front is just slightly smaller at 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, sorry. So I have a tiny bit of that blue border showing around the edge, which is just a shade darker than my blue window frame. So I kind of like that look. All right, so let's make a gift tag inspired by this card. I'm using the Special Day tag die set, 2 of the dies from that set. I use this set all the time. So I'm die cutting my tag here from white cardstock, which I thought was Bristol Smooth paper, and it turns out that it was not. So this is my second time coloring on Bristol Smooth paper with my zig, or paper that's not Bristol Smooth with my zigs. So I just cut that second frame die from a red tag and then use that as a template so I knew where to stamp my little bear. I'm going to color him the same exact way that I colored the polar bear for my card. But I noticed that it was way darker, and I was not able to blend out the edges, and that's when I realized I must have grabbed other cardstock. So instead of trying to ink blend his scarf, I just colored it in solid, which made it a really fast way to color it. And if you're making tags, you kind of want them to be quick and easy. So I just went with it instead of die cutting one from Bristol Smooth. And because I wasn't doing a ton of coloring, it was okay for this. And if you're going to color things in, then other paper besides Bristol Smooth would maybe work for you. All right, so then we'll glue on the frame, die cut from red cardstock, and then the little paws on the edge of the tag. So cute. Now, I could have turned this into a shaker, but again, a lot of these tags are going to be tossed and never to be seen again. So I don't like to put as much effort into a tag as I do into a card all the time. And so this is just a quick and easy tag. I stamped the little snow around him, which is a cute little stamp in the Cocoa Stand stamp set, as well as the sentiment that says Happy Holidays that I'm stamping on that turquoise blue paper that I used for the front of my shaker card. It's called Beach Breeze from Fun Stamper's Journey, and I'm going to emboss that sentiment with white embossing powder and heating that up to melt the powder before I stick it down onto my tag. And I'll just glue that in place, centering it on top of the tag, and then I'll trim off the excess so that I know it was centered. And then I need to punch a hole in the top of this tag, so I'm bringing in my crocodile that I've had for 100 years since I used to do eyelets on my cards. And that creates the hole punching through both layers quite easily. And then I'm tying on some peppermint twine from Lawn Fawn into the top because it's my favorite. I love it. Such perfect Christmas twine for a tag. I'll just trim off those edges so they're not too long, and that completes the tag and my shaker card. I hope you have enjoyed episode 2 of the Cocoa Stand stamp set. Next week I will be making an actual cocoa stand. So make sure you come back and check that out next week. Leave a comment below. Tell me if you like this card, if you like the tag, and you could be entered to win it. I will announce the winner on next week's video. If you're new here, I would love for you to subscribe, and all the items I used are listed and linked for you below. Thanks so much for watching. Happy stamping. Bye.